Kia ora koutou, assalamu alaikum. I want to talk today about the growth of fascism and the death of humanity in Israeli society. With the passage this week of a draconian death penalty law that is effectively designed only to apply to Palestinians, more people around the world than ever are noticing that Israelis are in a very dark place. The scenes from the Knesset following the vote were not of solemnity, nor of determination, nor regret. We saw instead scenes of glee, scenes of great pleasure at the prospect of this horrific form of violence. We saw unabashed, unhidden, unafraid displays of joyous sadism. Many of us here will know that this is not new. Shocking words and acts of racial hate have been increasingly easy to find among Israelis in recent decades. In 2015, a settler called Amiram bin Uliel murdered 3 members of the Dawabsha family. 18-month-old Ali Dawabsha burned to death, an innocent dying in intense agony and helpless terror. His parents lived for some weeks before each in turn died of the burns they had received. Hussein Dawabsha, Ali's grandfather, was taunted by Jewish settlers outside the court proceedings. They chanted in Arabic, "Where's Ali? There's no Ali. Ali is burned on the fire. Ali is on the grill." A settler called Limor Son Ha-Melech called that murderer a saint. She was also a co-sponsor of this death penalty bill. She has openly said that Palestinians must be executed if they kill Jews, but Jews should only be imprisoned for killing Palestinians. When 8 soldiers were indicted for raping a prisoner, she said that those who prosecuted Israeli personnel for such acts would themselves be, quote, charged and prosecuted as the lowest of traitors. In the Knesset, she angrily berated a doctor for saying that a 4-year-old Palestinian should have painkillers when their arm is amputated. On another occasion, 18 months into the Holocaust waged on Gaza, she was angered by the mention of starving children and called it horrific to address the issue when Israeli children were killed on October the 7th. There is also a video of Son Ha-Melech from 2005 encouraging her then 2-year-old son as he vowed to kill the Arabs. A settler called Itamar bin Gvir was in court the day that his fellow settlers taunted the grieving man over the cruel murder of his son, daughter-in-law and grandson. Bin Gvir was the defense lawyer for the murderer, whom he still openly supports. Bin Gvir at that time had a portrait of Baruch Goldstein in his living room. Goldstein committed a brutal mass murder in 1994, killing 29 Muslim Palestinians who were praying during Ramadan before himself being beaten to death by the survivors. His grave is treated by Jewish fascists as a shrine. Bin Gvir is reported to have taken his wife to the graveside on their first date. People may have seen Itamar bin Gvir recently, pouring champagne to celebrate the passage of the Death Penalty Act. He is Israel's current Minister for National Security. He loves to yell at and bully those he calls terrorists. He visited prisoners taken from the Gaza Freedom Flotilla in international waters. He taunted and yelled at these people who had been abducted on the high seas and held illegally, calling them terrorists. But he himself has a criminal conviction for inciting racial hatred and supporting a terrorist organization. A settler called Bezalel Smotrich is bin Gvir's close political ally. He is the current Minister of Finance and Minister of Transport, and he is a junior Minister of Defence. He is the main perpetrator in the ongoing ethnic cleansing and annexation of the West Bank, which is a flagrant violation of international law and innumerable resolutions by the UN Security Council and the UN General Assembly. He has what he calls a decisive plan of flooding the West Bank with settlers. As a journalist wrote, quote, "When this happens, Palestinians are supposed to understand that they have no chance to get a state of their own, and they will have to choose between one of three options: a life of subjugation under Israeli rule, immigration, or death." Smotrich also supports the genocidal cleansing of Gaza, saying in 2024, quote, "There are no half measures, only total annihilation. They shall block out the remembrance of Amalek from under heaven. There is no place for them under heaven." Smotrich is another vocal supporter of Ali Dawabche's murderer. He refused to call the attack terrorism, which he claims can, quote, "only be violence carried out by an enemy within the framework of war against us." He supports a shoot-to-kill policy for Palestinian stone throwers. When 17-year-old Ahad Tamimi was arrested, he tweeted that, quote, "she should have gotten a bullet, at least in the kneecap." I could also mention Smotrich's violent and obscene homophobia, or the time that Ben Gvir told Bedouins, quote, "We will mow you down, we are the landlord here." I could list evidence of their fascist nature all day, but I will spare you that. Smotrich and Ben Gvir combined their two parties into one for the election purposes so that neither party risked falling below the threshold in their proportional system. This was an idea suggested by Benjamin Netanyahu. Together the parties polled 10%, yet these two junior coalition partners seem at times to almost run the country. It's almost as if the main ruling party and its leader uses their open extremism as a cover and a source of deniability for his own violent extremism. Not that we could ever relate to that in this country, right? Settlers like Libor Ha-Melech, Bezalel Smotrich, Itamar Ben-Gvir provide cover for all Israelis. Israelis want to pretend that this is not who they are, but it is. There is a German saying from World War II, quote, "If a Nazi is sitting at the table and 10 others are sitting there chatting with him, you have 11 Nazis at the table." It is not just the 10% who voted for these extremist parties who support their extremism. It is those who voted for Likud, which openly supported them, and for the other parties that are willing to work with them. Their settler extremism is actively supported by every Israeli that is not opposed to the settlements in the occupied territories, and every Israeli who believes that Palestinian resistance is a form of terrorism. Almost every adult Israeli is at that table, and that table means that they are the Nazis. Jewish Zionists inside and outside of Israel will be very offended to be called Nazis, but my answer to them is that if they're so hurt by being called Nazis, then they should stop being Nazis. It's not as if I invented the idea that Zionists can be Nazis. David Ben-Gurion himself called the revisionist leader Zev Jabotinsky Vladimir Hitler. A little over a decade later, though, Ben-Gurion spearheaded the Nakba, doing everything that he had once called Jabotinsky a fascist for advocating. Nothing illustrates better than this, that the table of Nazis is Zionism itself. This new law shows the world that behind the racialized and Islamophobic excuses about self-defense, Israel is a society in the grip